All right, so I wanted to discuss an issue that has been prominent in my mind for the last couple of weeks. You could argue the last couple of months, but I don't think it's as bad as it was before. So I've been in the past critiqued for, I guess, a perception that I am not one to change my position or otherwise adapt to something that someone else espouses. And I oftentimes say that it's really customary of humans when they reach a certain age to not be influenced or otherwise affected by the position of others. What do I mean by that? Well, when I was talking to this one person who is in their mid 40s, let me say hello to Brock Vulture. I was trying to, let me say hello to Envoy. Um, I was trying to discuss with them Medicare for all or single payer. And they're an apolitical person, so they're someone that does not usually follow politics, but they're familiar with Obamacare and how we didn't really have what could be considered a safety net prior to that. And I explained to this person who identifies as a Democrat that, hey, look, that's a Republican idea that left millions of people uninsured. And I told her it was a step in the right direction as far as getting people more coverage, but there were still a bunch that were left without coverage. Subsidies were, still costing a lot. It was started by Big Pharma, the main antagonist of healthcare in America. So I tried to, list the problems with it. And this person kind of conceded a little bit, but I said, if we had single payer, people would pay higher taxes, but their healthcare would be free. We have this in other countries. And this person kept harping on the fact that the taxes would go up as the reason for their opposition. I said, look, whenever you have a system and you're talking, oh, you're lagging hard, uh, or maybe it's me. I'll tell you what, I'll play it on my phone, then we'll see if I'm lagging. That's the one good thing about always checking the comment section. I get to see if the actual video is screwing up or whatever's happening on someone else's side. So I just played it on my phone. It looks to be fine. Yeah, I don't have lag either, Broad Vulture. Maybe Envoy is his computer's a couple of years old. But going back to what I was saying, they kept harping on the part about the higher taxes. I kept explaining to them that this would cover everyone, or it would be a much more sustainable system, in my view, that's been used repeatedly, just in multiple different countries. So much so that we've actually there was a story about Rand Paul, who's one of the few Republicans I like because I agree with him on being a non-interventionalist, so not going into all these different wars, where he flew to Canada to get their to use their medicine and their healthcare for part of some surgery. And you might say to yourself, well, that's a pretty mean thing to say about a person in office that doesn't have the same position as you. But I'm saying that he is purposefully benefiting from a system in another country that he opposes being implemented here. So I think you can kind of get the hypocrisy. If this version of healthcare is so great, why would you have to go somewhere else to get your surgery? But that's not me saying, "Oh, I hope you don't go over and I hope you die." No, it's just me saying that you can't tell me this is so good and then use the other person's system that we're advocating for being used here as well. So that person, even though they were apolitical, kind of was stuck in their way as far as no, we don't. I don't want that system. Or I have a problem with that system. Um, and I was thinking a lot about how when I was talking to another person who's apolitical, that just doesn't follow this stuff, and then occasionally will say ask something about it. I thought about an argument I had with them and having a person who claims to be as interested in this stuff as I am, and I dispute that because they oftentimes will watch places like CNN and MSNBC, stuff that I'm disgusted by or sources that I'm not a fan of. So they're more into the establishment news section of trying to get their information. And they told me, oh, well, this person's not into politics. They're into clothes and this other stuff, but that's fine because we're into this. I said, wait a second. This person told me that I had a problem, like criticized me for, what were my differences from them, not actually having some debilitating thing that prevents me from being able to, participate in other things. But the bottom line is you can't insult me and my decisions to do things the way I want to, and then not expect to get a reprisal. So it's kind of a thing of, you do your own thing, I'll do my own thing. But if you say something about my thing, don't expect yours to not be discussed or talked about. Where you want this person to adapt to the way you are, but then you don't want them to say anything about the way you are. Just, it doesn't make sense. Okay, Envoy, you're saying it's fine now. Good. I didn't fire any shots, Bro Vulture. That's fake news. But going over to when I did the Twitter campaign about the military budget, the whole point of discussing that was to bring up how much money was being sent to this one branch of government and how it doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things, because we're sitting here in this shutdown that's been almost a month over, Trump wanting 5 billion for the border wall. I've talked about my own distaste for that policy before, but think about this. If you can spend $717 billion in the military, you can't take 5 billion out of that to fund this other thing. Do you see where it starts seeming more and more finicky and more nonsensical that they can't afford this? And that position's never been discussed. It's like they want to break down your points, but you're not allowed to do the same to them, almost like a one-sided battle where you're the only one taking hits. Yeah, Bro Vulture, exactly. And this was very evident when I used to talk about the romance stuff, when it was and I would put it in the title, because I had a person who actually came into my comment section and wrote me this big, huge, paragraphs long thing about all the stuff I needed to do. And I responded back to him because he had insulted me in the midst of writing this. And his response was to say, "Oh, I barely read any of what you wrote." And I said, "Wait a second. You're not going to come over here and gaslight me about all the disagreements you have and then insult me. But then when you get the same rebuttal, you get a rebuttal to your point, you don't bother to read it. It doesn't make any sense." Yeah, Envoy. When I go on Twitter, when I was doing the campaign and actually looking at what people would write, I would be astonished by almost this. I mean, the antagonism was so toxic and just disgusting. There was a person who wrote that every single homeless person. I did a video about it. There was the guy who wrote every homeless person is that way because of their own stupidity, and then he has a GoFundMe begging for $1,000 or whatever. Like that stuff solidified what the problem here is, which is a lack of empathy, a lack of being able to understand um, circumstances that are out of people's control. Someone who was born in the last 40 years can't control that the wages have been the same way as they were in the 80s. That's just the fact. So, when I read that and I thought about, yeah, you remember on the homeless, yeah. But when Envoy, when I was talking to this person and I was so disgusted by what they wrote, I said to myself, wait a second, why do I even engage these people? Because there was a Trump supporter who had actually tried to say, "Oh, well, there's plenty of reasons why people are homeless." And I said, "Wait a second. If these were the Obama years, and he was in office, the guy that you people hated, and we had this problem, which we did. That this is again me being fair to Trump. This started before he entered office. It just hasn't been changed or altered in any way." Um, these same people would criticize Obama. They would say his economic policies have failed, which I'm not going to object to. But the point is, these would be the same individuals who would go and criticize the person in office as the primary reason for this problem existing. But now that the guy that they like is in office, they completely ignored it. All these things. Let me see. I think the empathy in a weird way is being taken out of society. I say it's because the bloodlust of money in this world with capitalism, big city, so there's no communities. Raw Vulture, if you missed that one, I have to remember what its name is. I have to send it to you. But I knew it was the same person because they had the same avatar and the same username and the same pictures. So that when it comes to that GoFundMe, I'm just saying that was completely unexpected. I just typed their name in on Google, I was like, wow. And it's part of what is so toxic about trying to talk about this stuff, because I used to believe in this idea that if you give people information, they can adapt to whatever that perspective or that position is. I'll read your comment in a minute, Envoy, but let me continue to make my point. So, for example, when I first started talking about politics. I used to be a self-identified Democrat, and then I sat there and was shown all the different wars Obama was in, then changed my position. That was something that I came to the perspective of based on information that was presented to me after that point. But it seems like other people who I've interacted with have this thing where they're going to stick to this perspective no matter what happens. I don't like that idea because I think it's counterintuitive. Circumstances change, people have things come up they didn't expect. So it's not, I don't think, particularly healthy to go, okay, well, even if this thing I like fails, I'm going to stick by and say it was the right thing. Hell, they could implement, I don't know, single payer healthcare, and then it somehow has problems over here, but it succeeds in, let's say it fails to cover everybody because of the way it's been implemented. I'm going to say, okay, we need to do something about that, fix it. I'm not going to sit there and see the sinking ship and say, oh, no, that's good. We need to keep it the way it is. Leave it alone. It's fine. Because I don't believe in that um, hive mind, stick to it no matter what perspective. Okay, so Envoy says, think about mental illness is skyrocketing among every demographic. It's real sad. Yeah, people are losing their minds, and we're seeing it on social media. People, one of the problems with the internet is that anyone who can afford a computer or get access to a computer can go on there and write whatever they want with pretty much no reprisal. There was a person who identified as an artist, for example. This person who wanted to draw. And at the beginning of last year, after we had the Parkland shooting, they talked about how happy they were because this meant less competition for them. And I just thought to myself, you would not see something like that if this were the 70s or the 80s, where we didn't have people being able to write stuff and anyone can see it in 2 seconds. I mean, it was insane to me. I couldn't believe it. So that was another disgusting thing that happened. Brock Vulture must have gone to sleep or gone on a date or something. He's been very successful ever since I stopped doing regular streams about that stuff. Oh, there you are. I was getting really worried. I thought you had disappeared for the night. You'd hung up the hat. No, but going back to what I was saying, there's another problem where we talk about really any issue you can think of. There's always someone who's going to oppose it and have a counterintuitive, argument. So, for example, when Trump pulled out of Syria, I was really happy. I backed him. This is one of only a few things he's done in office that I liked. And I took a lot of pride in supporting that because I had people on Twitter, who are the standard never Trump individuals that are pissed off with everything he does. And they were going after me. They were going, how could you support this? We need to protect the Kurds. And I said to them, one of them actually said, oh, well, all the generals are saying this is stupid and the senators are saying, it's like, I don't care. It's like, you guys think that because someone has a title next to their name, that supposedly is going to make their position seem all the more bigger than my own. You're not going to impress me because you were elected senator running on abortion being taken away, and now all of a sudden you support this conflict because defense contractors pour money into your pocket to let them run rampant in this other region. But I had these people who were going after me, and I told one of them the U.S. is run by fools in response to her mentioning the different public officials that were arguing against this position. No, I don't argue with them. I write back maybe one time, sometimes not at all. But it's just this thing where I think to myself, what do you seek to accomplish? It's kind of like how when they were talking about the Rashida Tlaib incident, I don't know if you remember, Envoy, the new congresswoman that said impeach that, and how it drew this big controversy. So the problem I had with the outrage to that is the problem I have with the outrage to a lot of Trump's rhetoric. Oh my God, he swore. Who cares? I have a problem with him entirely on policy. If he came out tomorrow and signed Medicare for all into law, I'm not going to care if he says, I'm going to sign this, enter swear word here policy into law because of all these, just any kind of cursing sentence that could go along. But because the media in the US is so twisted and dumb and backwards, they'll talk more about him swearing than anything he's doing in office. And then they'll prop up people like Flake from Arizona and say, "Oh, well, this is a Republican who is opposed to the horrible things that the president's saying." It's like, I don't care. He still votes them most of the time. So it's just it's all a big cycle of hypocrisy and not really seeing the bigger picture. And that's kind of how I felt about with the opposition to her. She says one swear word, and all these people lose their minds, but they won't lose their minds over 76% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, 30 million Americans being uninsured. What's another statistic we can put out there? Over 40% of the homeless having jobs and still having nowhere to live because of how crappy the wages they have are. There's loads and loads of daily mass shootings, loads of issues that could be discussed and talked about in prime time that no one brings up. And that's why when I see how little attention they receive, and also the people who've actually tried to insult me over this being my main thing I'm interested in, I always kind of look at it really cynically, because I say to myself, well, if this stuff was so unimportant, like the way you pretend it is, why do we have all of these issues? Why are so many people being affected by this? Over the last couple of days, I've been unsubscribing from political media channels, taking a step back. I realize just how damaging identity politics is. I think when any channel that's run by more than one person, you're always going to get individuals who piss you off to such an extent that you contemplate not watching those people anymore. I told you another Stream Envoy that on TYT, they have one panelist who anytime she's on there, I stop watching. I turn it off because that person annoys me so much. But when you go and you watch a channel where it's just one person speaking, you usually can get a consistent tone from that person. Possibly, maybe, who knows? Okay, I do like if that's what you're talking about. I just saw your comment right now, Broad Vulture. I'm not saying you can't like that kind of content. I'm just telling you that I got burnt out, because if you saw the proof romance is a scam one, the whole point was uh, you can't have a person keep talking about this without it getting stale. So, for example, you go out and you meet someone, they waste your time for 2, 3 weeks, a month, whatever. I go on there, I say, this is stupid. I have the comment section open. Most people say, yeah, that was dumb. Somebody says, oh, maybe it's not her, maybe it's you. And then we go back to the regular stuff. And then the same thing repeats itself a couple of weeks later. I talk about that. I didn't see where that would be entertaining to watch, or otherwise something people would consistently be engaged with. It's almost like being on a Ferris wheel, and I've compared it to that before, just like with the political arguments, where I got tired on Twitter of going on there and trying to talk to people and say to myself, well, maybe since the media barely covered this, a lot of people who didn't know about it will be outraged by, this being implemented / it not being covered that much, even though it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And seeing people who basically not only agreed with it, but got pissed at me for even mentioning it. So it was just this thing where I said to myself, what's the end goal for this? When does it change? When does it feel as if you're actually doing something that matters? Treat it as science. I don't know what that is supposed to mean. I don't think I've treated them as a science. If you're making commentary on me, you have to elaborate, Broad Vulture. I want to make sure we clarify the extent of what you're saying. And again, I know a lot of times when people say clarify or tell me what you mean, it might sound confrontational. I just want to make sure that I'm actually responding to your position. Oh, the theory. I mean, my problem with people who talk about that stuff extensively is that they always act as if you just follow this doctrine, it's going to always go that one way. And I just don't think people, yeah, just like you said, there are just so many outcomes. I don't think there's one way of doing this. I could go and for example, talk to someone for 2 weeks and then get their number, and then talk to someone for 2 years and still only have their, I don't know, email. So a lot of this stuff, it goes by whatever the other person wants. That's why with one of my colleagues that I mentioned on here with high esteem, when he and I were speaking, we talked, pretty much at least once a week, every week for about 5, 6, 7 months, and all of a sudden he said he needed a break from whatever, and I didn't hear from him after that. And you can see that's an interaction that lasted for as long as it did because both people in this, granted it's platonic, but in this interaction, this correspondence wanted to speak to each other over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until one of them said basically screw it. So that's why the stuff is not, there's too many different variances that we get that make it to where you can have a theory on this in my opinion. Also, Envoy, I wanted to ask you, do you prefer this kind of format where you do a stream and it's a basically one topic that's kind of like the whole thing of changing someone's mind is general enough to where you can kind of discuss something political or something on a personal level or just any of the sort of, back and forths that you might get? Just like with the prime minister no confidence vote, how even though the beginning of that is me talking about it, it kind of starts deviating and all kind of other stuff. And I kept explaining that, you go and you read a title and the person writes the title before the stream actually starts. So as they're progressively going through it and people are making commentary on whatever the hell, it depends what is exactly stated by the other people that's going to cause it to switch around so much. Do you like that format or what? Would you rather we just have it to where I do like I usually do during the week and just put my phone up to the computer screen and talk about the news or some other event? And the audio on those are way better for some reason. Swear when you put the these phones, man, they're so weird. If you put the phone to where it's facing you, so the camera's flipped to my direction, the audio on that is garbage. Even if I put my headphones on now, but if you put it to where it's directed toward whatever you're facing, way better, exceptionally. We live in the twilight zone, so technology does all kind of stuff that doesn't even make any sense. I usually like the back and forth. I like taking the different places, but for you, I understand how sometimes you don't like it when the conversation deviates. Well, there are still times where it just feels as if you get to such an extent on the topic that you don't feel like talking about it anymore. Like I mentioned the problem with the homeless. I've talked about the need to raise wages. How I think that's a position that people only act in opposition to because they've bought into the Kool-Aid that automatically, if you raise the wage by no matter what, it's going to destroy the world or whatever. I mean, my God, I saw this guy and he said you're going to get laid off, and I'm like, if we increase it by 10 cents, 5 people lose their jobs. By $1, the world ends. No matter what it is, it could be the smallest thing in the world, but they just lose their minds. They're always going to be opposed to it. That's why I can't take politicians seriously when they say they could never support it and all that, because it's not, they're not talking about a particular proposal. What do you think about having special guests? The problem with doing that is I can't control what the person's going to say. So just like when I did the one with my friend, I don't know if you remember Bro Vulture, where it was like back in June when we talked about the proof of romantic whatever. He swore during that video, and I usually don't use any actual swear words besides hell and maybe damn or whatever. But it's one of those things where they don't. I don't like the idea of me and this person speaking, and then you say something that's out of the customary for what you expect when you come over here. I think people are so against wages because of America's debt, but to be honest, the cost of living is getting ridiculous now. Well, here's the thing, Envoy. My problem is the idea. No, I'm not going to say how dare you, Bro Vulture. I don't. He can swear if he wants to. Just it's kind of one of my little pet peeves. I can't control what the person's going to say, and they might say something that's insane. People in their 20s are staying at home longer. They're living paycheck to paycheck, like you said. Yeah, and that's my central point, that they act as if there's no such thing as price controls, which are purposefully designed so that if you raise the wages, companies cannot raise their prices, and these the cost of living can't go up because you've blocked it. And that's why when I talk about why governors won't do it, it's designed by people like Bezos, the owner of Amazon, so that they can make as much money as possible while the people who work for them are all the way down there. That's why when they talk about the economy going into recession, it's because people aren't buying anything. I mean, I look at my own stuff, right? Where I ask myself, what do I buy usually? I buy some food, I'll buy some I don't buy very many clothes because I don't need very many clothes. But if there's a shirt I really like or some other thing, I'll get it. But the other flip side of that coin is that I'm consciously aware of how much of this is a necessity and how much of it is not. And most people, by and large, seem to function that way, where the less money that they have or that they accumulate, the less you call it discretionary spending they're going to engage in. So as a result, these companies are going to see less and less and less of their stuff get purchased, and then end up having to go out of business. Uh, yeah, rich get richer. But do you see how? Like, think about this. To prevent you from getting the minimum wage, or rather, I'm a billionaire. I'm Bezos, right? Just in this hypothetical, and I want so much more money that I'm going to take the little dollars, the ones, right, that you would get in your minimum wage. I'm going to do that by hiring you part time, so I don't have to pay you a full wage, which already is kind of crappy to begin with. Like, just think of how psychotic that is. I'm a billionaire, and I'm going to ensure that people who are all the way who will not make even a 100th of what I've made in my lifetime are going to get even less, so I can get just a little bit more. Like, you see where it's like a well, like a little itty bitty well that he's suckling off. Like, you know what? A better example, a cow. So you know how they milk cows? They go and they suck they grab the others or whatever. Yeah, I used the wrong word there. Imagine like the cow is out of milk and there's like little pieces dripping down. That's Bezos. He has his little bucket, just getting little pieces as much as he can. I read up on global news regarding Christmas. Places like England suffered a drop in the amount of Christmas sales in shopping malls because of online shopping, but also I think it's because of the economy, like you said. I'm telling you, Envoy, I oftentimes talk about my problems with people, like how I think it was 50 something percent of Americans can't name a single Supreme Court justice, which is ridiculous. But most of them are smart enough to figure out, hey, if I am damn near broke because my company isn't paying me worth the damn, and like we said before, it's like 50 some, it's half of people only make 30,000 a year, and cars on average are costing what, 20,000. Basically you have to spend most of what you make a year just to get a car nowadays. You're going to see less and less people buy those things. So that's why the economy is always a house of cards, because most people can't afford this stuff. And I actually, so what I find really funny, and part of the reason my mind was so changed on Democrats, is that there actually is a clip, Envoy, of Obama, where he mentions that people are like when he's talking about why people can't afford, I think it was healthcare or something. He mentions people are buying the newest iPhone and some other device. I said to myself, if someone can't spend, what does an iPhone cost? Something, just whatever. Let's say $100, 200, 300. If someone cannot spend that one time, they're not buying 30 of those things. If that, of a phone, they're just getting one. But if somebody can't spend that one time every 2, 3, 4 years, there's a bigger problem than what money that they have being and where it's being allocated to. So that's just my position. Uh, Envoy says Ocasio-Cortez talked about taxing the rich even further, but there's something fishy. I haven't read up on her politics and whatnot. I think you mentioned it bothers you how you need to take an interview to get a job, need a license to drive, a license to sell liquor. Yeah, well, you have to. Oh, I think you might have been mentioning the thing with children, like how you have to get all of this certification to get a car, to sell something, to you have to go through an interview to get a job. But if you want to if you want to bring a life into this world, all you have to do is open your legs. Oh man, there's something wrong with that. And then if anyone says, hey, maybe there should be a requirement in between now and then, people are going to say you're trying to go back to some 13th century stuff. So you can't win with that. But you just need to be a certain age to vote. There should be a general of what's going on politically to vote. I agree. But people don't want to change their minds about this stuff.